people who are populating the cast with more female characters, then I think one thing that might be playing a factor that we can point to at this point is a lack of female directors and writers. Working in US films, and now it seems like working in other territories as well. It would be great to do a bigger study to find out if that continues to be the case, because there's other places that have said there's maybe more directors or writers than what we saw in this study. But in the places where there were more writers or directors, like in the UK independent sample, like in the China sample, we did see more female characters. We did see perhaps more female leads or more gender balance. So I think it's an interesting question, and some of the other work that we've done, funded by the Sundance Institute in Women in Film, we've looked at the barriers that female directors in particular face as they try and navigate their careers, and it would be really interesting to see if those barriers are international as well. If women in the UK, if women in, say, Korea or in Japan or in Brazil are facing similar barriers related to finance, to the structure and the gender composition of the networks that they work in, whether unconscious biases that we think of in terms of the way we conceive of a directing role as perhaps more masculine, if those persist in other places. So I think those are some of the questions that we have about US media, and then now about international media more broadly. And as we start to answer those questions, we may start to uncover what other factors might be limiting the rate of increase for female characters.
Thanks for that. I mean, I think there is a part of this is representation of female directors and producers. There is also the issue around social norms and culture. And we were supportive of a World Bank study on norms and agency, it's called, and a very clear relationship between the culture in countries and social norms in terms of the way that people see themselves and their roles in society and in family. Moira, I want to come to you because you are obviously leading a fantastic publication in Forbes Women and wrestling with these issues not only in the US but also internationally. And with respect to the cultural challenge for women in the US, and the social norms that we have, and what we're seeing also overseas, how is Forbes in particular shaping the dialogue around women in terms of the roles that we play in society?
Well, as you mentioned, one of my roles at Forbes is overseeing a platform called Forbes Woman, which is dedicated to women in business and leadership. And we at Forbes have had a long history of spotlighting women who ascended into different categories of leadership across our history. But about 7 years ago, we saw that there was a real opportunity and also a real need and hunger for our audience for us to go deeper. How do we really cultivate these conversations around women in business and leadership, and how do we become a resource to spotlight issues that are keeping women up at night, not just here in the US, but around the world? How do we take those issues and how do we become a catalyst for conversation? How do we spark much needed dialogue on a variety of different issues? And then how do we become a community for like-minded individuals around the world who are seeking to advance great leaders, who are seeking to advance this change? And so that's really the genesis of Forbes Woman, creating this platform 365 days a year to have the conversations that we're having here. And for us, we've talked a lot about film today. For us and the work we do at Forbes, so much about it is storytelling as well. Not necessarily in the fictional sense, hopefully not. That doesn't happen. But it's really the people behind the business, the people who are doing extraordinary things. And we seek to do that in the women's space as well. And we feel like it's a huge responsibility that we have to be driving the dialogue on these issues. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but also it makes business sense, not just here in the US, but around the world. And I'll give one quick example. We do a lot of work in Asia. You saw some of the countries represented in this film study, but a country like Japan, for example, where cultural norms and the like, still very, very hard for women to advance. But the countries face a huge economic issue. With the Prime Minister in charge now has taken huge measures to advance women moving forward. The reason for that is they're having a huge talent drain in the labor workforce. Japan's a unique country in that they have one of the most highly educated female populations in the world, higher than most countries in the developed nations. And they have a real issue because only 63% of their women are going into the informal or formal labor economy. That's actually a number that's far lower than developed nations. When women have children, for example, 70% of the women drop out of the workforce for at least 10 years after they've had their first child. That compares to 30% in the US. If they are able to actually bring women back into the labor force, that equals 8 million new jobs for Japan and equals a GDP increase of 15%. Astonishing economic activity. So when we look at these bleak numbers of women's representation, part of that stems to the fact that there is somewhat of a reality in that. And so how can we as a media company drive conversations on how to get women more into the workforce, spotlight countries and companies who are doing innovative things like Japan, and hopefully start to see the change that we all hope to have.
That's really fantastic. I think we need more dialogue like that to help us figure out how we do close the gap, both around the world generally on this. And I'd like to bring Doreen in here because I think the International Telecommunication Union also has a role in helping us understand the dynamics with respect to gender equity and how do we close the gap and give inspiration really for different outlets to be able to tell the story as we see it in real life.
Thank you, Sunday. And first, I just wanted to start by congratulating Geena in her new role on Grey's Anatomy. I hope that we can have a sort of Grey's Anatomy for the tech sector. And I also wanted to congratulate Stacey and the team for the study. I read the study on my way to New York from Geneva on the plane, and I must say I was shocked, but I was frustrated. And maybe Mark, you were saying before, you see more professors around campus that are women, but actually in the tech sector, what you guys are finding, that's exactly the way it is in real life. In the IT, we have 193 member states. And of the 193 member states, we only have 16 women ministers. 16. We have 158 regulators, only 10 of them are women. And then if you look at like app developers, if you look in Europe, 9% of app developers are women. And when we look at who's taking up computer science, who's getting into STEM fields, the numbers are going down. When computer science came on the scene in the late 80s, it was about 50-50. Girls were taking up careers, boys were taking up careers. Now it's more like 80-20. And so we're in this difficult situation in the tech sector, which is certainly not helped by the media. It's like a vicious circle or a self-fulfilling prophecy in that girls are not seeing it in the media, so they don't want to be it. And here we are in the tech sector, and we're trying to promote women in leadership roles. We're doing our best at the ITU to try to attract more women to come into the ITU and to get our member states to hire women, but they're not there. So what we're doing in the ITU, and Geena's been instrumental in her role as our special envoy for women and girls, we started something 4 years ago that's called Girls in ICT. And what we do for Girls in ICT is the fourth Thursday of every April. Every year we do a number of events. We call upon our member states, our sector members, which are our private sector members. We have over 700 companies. And we call upon them on that day to do something special, to bring in girls to work. Companies like Cisco, Intel, Alcatel, Microsoft, they've done a lot organizing events on that day to show girls that the tech sector is a sector that they should be thinking about for career choices. You don't have to be an engineer necessarily. You can be communications, journalism, you can even be a lawyer, but the tech sector is a real option. And it's actually a sector where there is a huge skills shortfall. And when we look at global unemployment for youth, we need to get young people to think about this. And so over the past 4 years, we've had 140 countries honor this celebration, and we've been able to reach out to over 100,000 girls. So it's not enough, but it's a start. So we're doing that. The second thing that we're doing, which we just started a few months ago, together with UN Women, and keeping in mind next year's Beijing +20 celebrations, is we launched a call for an award. It's called the Gender Equality and Mainstreaming in Technology Award. We came up with 7 categories, ranging from using technology in political empowerment, to using technology in economic empowerment, content creation, different categories. And we did this open call to the world. We got individuals, civil society, government organizations, private sector, and we had 360 nominations. The nominations just closed last week. And what we received were amazing stories. And if anybody's looking for a script, we've got the script. Because these are amazing stories of women. There's an initiative I was talking about this morning in Mali, where a bunch of mothers have started this initiative. It's called the MAMA, and it's Mobile Mothers Against Malaria in Mali. And so they're going around trying to get and detect malaria cases using their cell phones. So with these 360 stories, I invite any of you that wants to write a script or do something, because it's there, things are happening, but we're not able to scale it and really to get the interest in trying to get more people in this sector. And it's a sector that can transform all the other sectors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's really fantastic, and congratulations on all that you are doing. I'd like to turn to Gary, because I think in our discussions around what the evidence shows us, there are 2 sides of the coin, right? There's how women are portrayed or not, and then there's how men are portrayed. I think in some cases as well, we can also look to media and some of the issues in terms of stereotypes of how men should be. I think we heard earlier today the executive director of UN Women said men should be in the house as well, and I certainly agree with that. So Gary, if you could talk, particularly given this dialogue, you've been talking about a dialogue of change, and most recently the dialogue around domestic violence that we've been all engaged in over the past couple of weeks, given what's happened here in the U.S. and around the world for that matter. Can you share with us a bit about what Mundo is doing in bringing both men and young boys in the fold?
One of the challenges is to get men to talk about these issues without, as we heard at the beginning from Geena, men will show up and be the starring role all the time. What we do is we want to get men in the room to talk about why they shouldn't always be in the starring role, and what equality looks like and why it's good for them. And it's a little bit the challenge we would look at in this audience and see of just how few men we can get to come have this dialogue. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to point out and to get the stories shown, whether they're documentaries or public service announcements that we've done in a few countries of men doing the things we'd like men to do, speaking out against violence, or doing some of the care work. And they don't have to be fictional stories. We find men doing this. So one of the men that's in one of our films is he's the former lead drummer for one of Brazil's most famous rock bands called the Titans. Most rock drummers usually end their careers in overdose or things like that. Charles left his halfway through and said, I don't want to be on the road 200 days a year anymore because I have 2 young daughters. I'm leaving the band to do studio work and I'm staying home to be an involved father. So we got Charles to tell his film, we got it out in a public service announcement. Folks that men can look up to and say, wow, that's as valid a decision as a man could do as anything else. One of our stories from Sri Lanka shows a man who is the main caregiver for his children. His wife migrated for work. She's sending the remittances home. He's the one doing the caregiving. Usually, men send their children to their mothers or someone else to do the caregiving. He's in the film. We got it shown nationally across Sri Lanka, a discussion of men can do this, and they don't stop being men. So again, trying to get stories like this. 4 TV actors from Brazil who, together with us, are asking for paternity leave in Brazil to go 30 days of paid paternity leave in Brazil. It didn't pass, and even their employer, the largest TV station in Brazil, didn't want to pay for the leave, but nonetheless, we got a discussion going to say, why won't you pay for this? And the tagline for the public service announcement is, give me leave, I'm a father. So again, trying to use those stories that of men doing the change, living the change. Another key one that we're trying to do is to make noise when stuff happens in the media that is really sexist and harmful for all of us. And I think, again, remembering that we're consumers, right? We pay the salaries, we pay AMC when we go to the movie theaters. So again, when we see an ad that uses some message around, you're a wimp if you don't have the second beer, which a South African beer company did, or a Brazilian beer company that was using a woman's body to be the drink that a man was consuming. When there's stuff like this, that we'll add our voices to women's rights NGOs. We're now 600 plus NGOs working across the world of men and boys for gender equality. We'll put our voice out there to say, what's up with this? A condom ad that shows the real man does this because he doesn't want to leave any children out there, as opposed to saying, what is really responsible sexual behavior? So we'll take those on. Our voices may be small, but if enough of us put them out there, we think we can make a little noise and cause a little trouble. And the third point that we have to do is to get young people to be critical consumers of media. And one of the challenges, if you spend much time hanging out with adolescent boys, so after the games, after the video games, and after the sports, what is the form of media that boys are most likely to look at? Not very fun stuff to talk about, but to acknowledge that adolescent boys are probably the world's leading consumers of porn. And to get young men to have a discussion about what's going on in this film that you're just watching. What they normally tell us is that the dialogue in porn films consists of one word. It's basically yes, repeated in different forms. Trying to get young men to say, no, wait a minute, does this match reality? Why should you be disturbed about this? And how do we get a critical discussion going about that? So that we get young men to move towards saying, wait a minute, this is not, what you're looking at there and think is sexy doesn't match with real world. It doesn't match with what equality is. And to get a discussion that says, actually, if we listen to what's going on out there, that being a feminist man is the new sexy guys. Let's get with that. Let's get the sexy guy is the one who knows what mutual consent looks like. So again, how can we get young men and young women to be critical consumers of what they're looking at and to turn the channel when it's stuff that doesn't reflect what they're after? We're training teachers with an online training program in Brazil where we're able to reach up to 4,000 teachers with messages on how to do this. How can you have critical reflections about this, open reflections to get young people to remake and rethink what these norms look like? So again, I think all of these are things that we've tried. There's still a huge amount to do. But a key point, and I think Geena mentioned it and Zilly mentioned it, that we have skin in this game. We gain when we are able to kind of throw off these old stereotypes of what manhood and womanhood looks like. And that we all benefit when we sort of turn the page and get to something that looks like equality. So I do think we're sometimes doing a disservice by not inviting more men in the door. Not, again, as I said at the beginning, to be the starring roles. To sit on the back table, perhaps, and to have a conversation, to listen, and to be part of a gender equality movement.
That's fantastic. I was just thinking about, we get many messages, right? Several messages from films, but we also get messages from advertising as well. Angela, I wanted to come to you on this. I think it's one of the most familiar lines in advertising, actually, a L'Oreal tagline from Paris, because you're worth it.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit how the company came to that, how that came about. And then secondly, I was also really pleasantly surprised to see the company's EDGE certification, the Encouraging Diversity and Growth and Equity, I believe it's called. If you can say what you've learned by going through that process.
Okay, sure. Two points here. First of all, for those of you who don't know about L'Oreal, L'Oreal Paris, that carries the tagline, because you're worth it, is one of 28 global brands that the company represents, and we're in 130 countries. So each brand kind of has its own positionings. I'm sure you can imagine how that works. So for L'Oreal Paris to take on this idea of because we're worth it, and it's changed a little bit. Sometimes you'll hear it, because I'm worth it, because you're worth it, because we're worth it. That's because the message that we're delivering is changing to be much more relevant to what the consumer is telling us and the way she lives her life. So the initial intent certainly was about empowering women to invest in yourself, and it's okay to spend a little bit more on a product that makes you feel really great. And that message has migrated to still be that. We still pride ourselves on premium products, but also to talk about the fact that you are worth it and you are empowered to make decisions on your beauty. not just your external beauty, but your internal beauty. So brands like L'Oreal Paris, or whether it's Kiehl's, or whether it's Lancôme, we look for ways to communicate our message through spokespeople, brand ambassadors that help to employ women in Hollywood. So we're really proud of that. But it's also about making sure that we're enriching society, because it's not just about the external beauty. So like this research suggests that there's so much power and energy behind data, and we fundamentally believe